I'm Michael. I'm 28 years old, and on Christmas Eve, standing on the porch of the house I grew up in, my own father looked me in the eye and told me to go ruin someone else's holiday. Before I tell you how that single moment led to the complete implosion of my family and the exposure of a crime that had been festering for years, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's good to know you're out there. The cold of that December night was nothing compared to the ice in my father's voice. The wind cut through my coat, but his words cut straight through my soul. I was holding a bourbon pecan pie, my grandma's recipe, the one my mom and I had started making together after the divorce. The warmth from the pie dish was the only warmth I felt at that moment. In my other hand, I gripped the handle of a heavy bag filled with carefully wrapped gifts. Through the large bay window, I could see them all. My whole family. My brother, Thomas, was laughing, his head thrown back. My younger sister, Emma, was showing something on her phone to my grandpa Howard. Even my Aunt Helen and Uncle Victor were there, raising their glasses. Perfect Christmas card scene. Perfect family. And I was on the outside, looking in. My dad, James, just stood there in the doorway, blocking my path. His face was a hard mask of resentment. "We don't want you here," he repeated, his voice low and final. For a split second, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Was it regret? Shame? I don't know. But it was gone as fast as it appeared, replaced by that stubborn pride I knew so well. Behind him, I saw my brother Thomas catch my eye. He wasn't laughing anymore. He was smirking. A small, triumphant smirk that said, "You lose. I win." That was all I needed to see. The last shred of hope I'd been clinging to for 5 long years finally snapped. I didn't beg. I didn't argue. I just gave a single, sharp nod. "Got it," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. I turned around, walked back down the stone path, and didn't look back. I got into my car, the engine turning over with a quiet rumble that felt deafening in the silence of the suburban street. I placed the pie on the passenger seat, its sweet smell now feeling like a mockery. But I didn't break down. I didn't call my mom. Instead, I reached into the back seat and pulled a thick, heavy dossier onto my lap. On the cover, in stark black letters, were the words I had typed myself: Anderson Construction, Due Diligence. I opened it. Page after page of financial records, public filings, and inconsistencies I'd spent months compiling. This wasn't just about a ruined Christmas anymore. This was about exposing the rot that had hollowed out my family from the inside. And my visit tonight, that was just to see if there was anything left worth saving. Now I had my answer. This whole mess didn't start on that doorstep. It had been a slow burn, a 5-year process of being systematically erased from my own family. And for the longest time, I blamed myself, which I now realize was exactly what they wanted. It all traced back to my parents' divorce. It was bitter, the kind that leaves no survivors, only wounded parties. My dad, James, became a different person. He'd always been a man of simple tastes. He ran Anderson Construction, the company my grandpa founded. It was a world of concrete, steel, and handshake deals. His hands were calloused, and he smelled of sawdust and hard work. I, on the other hand, had chosen a different path. I wanted to be an architect. I didn't want to just build things. I wanted to design them, to create spaces that had meaning, light, and soul. To my dad, this was a fundamental rejection. A rejection of him, of his legacy. He saw my drafting table and my computer models as frivolous, an insult to the tangible, gritty world he knew. My older brother, Thomas, had been more than happy to step into the role of the golden child. He was 2 years older, and where I was thoughtful, he was brash. Where I was creative, he was practical. He joined my dad at the company right out of high school, embraced the life, and never looked back. The divorce just solidified their alliance. I was closer to my mom, Patricia. She was the one who encouraged my art, who bought me my first set of professional pencils, who came to every student exhibition, who told me I could be anything I wanted to be. After the split, my closeness with her became another black mark against my name in my father's book. The real poison, though, came from my Uncle Victor. He was my dad's younger brother, a smooth talker with soft hands and expensive shoes, who always seemed to be whispering in my father's ear. He was the one who handled the company's finances, the numbers guy. He convinced my dad that my mom had been unfaithful, a complete lie that my dad, in his bitterness and pain, chose to believe. Victor painted me as being under my mother's manipulative influence. He twisted my loyalty to my mom into a betrayal of my dad. The family gatherings, the few I was still invited to, became minefields. I remember my 25th birthday dinner. I had just landed a major internship at a prestigious firm. I was excited, proud. When I mentioned it, Thomas laughed. An internship? Mikey, I've been a site foreman for 5 years. When are you going to get a real job? My dad just grunted in agreement. Let's see if those fancy drawings can pay the bills. Every word was a small cut, designed to make me feel small, to make me regret my choices. The person who kept me sane through all of this was my best friend, Marcus. We'd known each other since kindergarten, when we got into a fistfight over a G.I. Joe figure and ended up as best friends. He was the most rational, level-headed person I knew. While I was wrestling with art and family drama, he was drawn to the beautiful certainty of numbers. He'd left our hometown to become a forensic accountant, a job that perfectly suited his meticulous, truth-seeking brain. He was a human lie detector. I remember calling him a few months before that Christmas, sitting in my new, empty loft apartment. I just won a major industry award for a sustainable housing project. My mom had been there, beaming in the front row. I'd sent an invitation to my dad and Thomas, of course. They declined, citing a busy work schedule. I just don't get it, man, I said into the phone, staring out at the city lights. Every time I accomplish something, it feels like I'm just digging the hole deeper with them. It's supposed to be good news. Because your success makes them feel insecure, Michael, Marcus said. His voice was calm, logical. You got out. You built your own life on your own terms. To them, especially to your dad and Thomas, that's a judgment on their own lives. It holds up a mirror, and they don't like what they see. It's not a judgment, I argued, even though I knew he was right. It's just my life. They don't see it that way. You need to stop seeking their approval. It's a game you can't win because they keep changing the rules. He was right. I knew he was right. But the pull of family is a powerful, irrational thing. A small, stupid part of me still thought that if I just tried a little harder, if I just showed them I still cared, things would go back to the way they were. The turning point, the thing that shifted me from a passive victim to an active investigator, happened by accident. As part of my job at Greenfield, I was overseeing a large commercial development. It involved a lot of public record searches, zoning applications, and financial due diligence. I was spending my days swimming in data, learning how money flowed through massive construction projects. One night, fueled by coffee and curiosity, I decided to look up some of Anderson Construction's recent projects, just to see what they were up to. I started with the new community center they'd built for the county. I pulled up the public records, the permits, the list of subcontractors. And that's when I saw it. A public filing for a materials contract. The supplier was a company I'd never heard of, Tri-State Aggregates. The amount was for over $1 million in structural steel and high-grade concrete. I knew the standard costs for a building that size. This was nearly double. It was a glaring, unjustifiable number. It made no sense. It was sloppy. A cold feeling crept over me. This wasn't just my dad's old-school way of doing business. This was wrong. I started digging. I spent the next 3 weeks of my life in a rabbit hole. After my day job at Greenfield, I'd come home and work until 2 a.m., surrounded by my own architectural models and a growing mountain of printouts about my father's company. I cross-referenced public records with old financial statements I remembered seeing back when I was in high school. I searched for Tri-State Aggregates. It didn't have a website, no physical address, just a P.O. box in a neighboring state. P.O. box I vaguely recognized. After an hour of searching through old emails, I found it. It was the same one my Uncle Victor used for a fantasy football league he ran years ago. My blood ran cold. I found more. Inflated invoices, contracts awarded to other shell corporations, Eastwood Holdings, Keystone Logistical Solutions, all traced back to empty offices or P.O. boxes, projects that ran massively over budget for no logical reason. The patterns all pointed to one person, the one person who had been handling the company's creative bookkeeping for years, the one person who stood to gain the most by keeping my father isolated and paranoid. Uncle Victor. That's when I called Marcus, not for emotional support but for professional help. We met at a quiet bar downtown, a place with dark wood and low lighting where no one would know us. I laid out everything I'd found on the table between our beers. He listened intently, his expression growing more serious with every page I showed him. He put on his reading glasses and scrutinized the documents, his accountant brain firing on all cylinders. "This is bad, Michael," he said finally, taking his glasses off and rubbing his eyes. "This isn't just bad bookkeeping. This is systematic fraud. Embezzlement on a massive scale. We're talking millions over at least a decade." "I know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What do I do? Legally? You take this to the district attorney. But this is your family. This will destroy them. Your dad, as president of the company, could be held liable even if he didn't know. At worst, he could face charges. At best, the company his father built will be ruined." The weight of that hit me. My dad could go to jail because he trusted his brother. "There's more," I said. "My sister Emma. She's been distant for years. I send her texts, emails, half the time I get no response. When I do, it's short, clipped. Not like her. Victor was always helping her with her phone, her computer. He'd clean it up for her. I think he was intercepting my messages to her. I can't prove it, but I know it." He created a smokescreen. Marcus pieced it together, his eyes wide with the chilling realization. The family drama, the fighting, turning everyone against you and your mom. It was all a massive distraction so no one would look too closely at the books. While you were all fighting about hurt feelings, he was robbing you blind. The sheer, cold-blooded calculation of it was staggering. My family's pain was just a tool for his greed. My father's grief, my brother's jealousy, my sister's isolation. He had weaponized it all. It was then I decided I needed to know the truth of the situation before I did anything drastic. I called Emma. My heart was pounding. We hadn't had a real conversation in almost 2 years. To my shock, she was thrilled to hear from me. "Mikey, oh my God. I was just thinking about you." Her voice was the same bright, bubbly voice I remembered from when we were kids. I cautiously asked about her design school applications. She lit up, telling me how my own career had inspired her. On a whim, I asked, "So, what's the plan for Christmas this year?" "Oh, you have to come," she said, without a second of hesitation. "Dad's been talking about it. He said it's time to put the past behind us. It'll be just like old times." Her sincerity felt real. But after what I'd just uncovered, I had to be sure. A few days later, I called the main house line. My dad answered. "Dad? It's Michael." There was a pause. "I know who it is," he said, his voice flat. "Emma mentioned you guys were having Christmas dinner. I'd love to come." Another long, cold silence. I could hear the faint sound of a TV in the background. "Fine," he finally said. The word was clipped, devoid of any warmth. It wasn't an invitation. It was a concession. That phone call was the final piece of the puzzle. Emma's warmth and my dad's coldness. Victor had gotten to him. My sister was being used as bait. I told Marcus the plan. "You're going to walk into the lion's den?" he asked, incredulous. "With what? A pecan pie. I'm going to give them one last chance to be a family," I said, my voice hard. "I'm going to look them in the eyes and see if there's anything left of the people I grew up with. And if there isn't," I tapped the folder of evidence I'd brought to the bar. Then I'm going to burn the den to the ground. Marcus stared at me for a long moment. You know, he said slowly, this is a bomb, Michael. You can't undetonate it. Going there isn't just about your feelings anymore. It's about deciding whether or not to light the fuse. I know, I said. That's why I have to go. The 2 weeks leading up to Christmas were some of the longest of my life. I was living a dual existence. By day, I was Michael Anderson, associate architect at Greenfield, leading team meetings, sketching designs for sleek glass and steel structures, and talking about things like load-bearing walls and environmental impact. By night, I was a man preparing for war, surrounded by paper instead of blueprints, digging into the rotten foundation of my own family. Marcus and I worked methodically. He used his expertise to organize my chaotic research into a professional, undeniable case. We created a clear, concise dossier. It had 2 sections. Section A was the emotional evidence. Screenshots of texts I'd sent Emma that I knew she'd never received, phone records of calls that were never returned, a timeline of my systematic exclusion from family events, complete with emails from my brother's wife, Sophia, politely uninviting me to my niece's birthday to keep the peace. It was petty, maybe, but it painted a clear, undeniable picture of isolation. Section B was the bombshell, the hard financial data, the inflated invoices, highlighted and cross-referenced, the incorporation documents for the shell companies, all leading back to that P.O. box Victor had opened 2 decades ago. The damning public contracts. It was a dense, boring, and utterly irrefutable story of greed. Marcus called it a prosecutor's dream. While Marcus handled the data, I prepared the gifts. It felt strange, almost surreal, to be picking out presents for people who I might be sending to court. But it was part of my plan. These weren't gifts of peace. They were statements. They were mirrors I was going to hold up to their faces. For my father, I didn't buy some expensive watch or bottle of scotch. I spent over 100 hours in my studio building a perfect, to-scale architectural model of the first house we ever lived in. The little blue house on Maple Street. I didn't use a kit. I built it from scratch, from memory. I remembered the exact shade of blue of the shutters. I remembered the slight sag in the porch roof. I spent an entire evening just getting the texture of the shingles on the roof right. As I worked, the smell of the balsa wood and the glue filled my apartment, and memories flooded back. I remembered sitting on that porch swing while he taught me how to tie my shoes, the patient way his big, calloused hands guided my small ones. I remembered the oak tree in the backyard I fell out of and broke my arm, and how he carried me all the way to the car. This model wasn't just wood and glue. It was a testament to a time when he was just my dad, not the bitter president of a company, a time before the money and the divorce had poisoned everything. It was a reminder of what he had lost, or more accurately, what he had given away. For Thomas, my golden child brother, I tracked down a set of original vintage blueprints from my grandpa's very first construction project from 1975. A small local library. It took weeks of calls to historical societies and dusty town archives. They were beautiful, drawn by hand with a precision and care that was almost artistic. It was a piece of the legacy he was always talking about, the heritage he claimed to cherish. I wanted him to hold the clean, honest work of our grandfather in his hands and ask himself if what he was doing now, enabling Victor's corruption, was worthy of that legacy. For Emma, I put together a professional portfolio of her artwork from the files my mom had saved over the years. I had them professionally scanned and printed on high-quality paper. I added a new drafting set and a book on architectural theory, with a handwritten note inside. Your eye for design is better than you think. Don't ever let anyone tell you what you can or can't build. It was a message of empowerment, a plea for her to break free. And for Uncle Victor, the architect of all this pain, I bought him an obscenely expensive fountain pen. Heavy, gold-plated, and ostentatious. The kind of thing a man uses to sign checks he knows he shouldn't be signing. I had it engraved. Not with his initials, but with 2 words, due diligence. It was a private joke, a final, silent threat that only he would understand. My mom, Patricia, knew something was up. I wasn't the same hopeful, heartbroken son she was used to comforting. I was quiet, focused, and there was a hard edge to me she hadn't seen before. She called me the day before Christmas Eve. "Michael, talk to me. You're going there tomorrow. I can hear it in your voice. Something's different." "I'm just tired of it, Mom," I said, trying to be vague. "Tired of what? The fighting? Or tired of losing?" she asked, her perception sharp as ever. I hesitated. I hadn't told her the full extent of what I'd found. I didn't want to worry her, to burden her with the financial mess on top of the emotional one. "I just have to do this, Mom," I said finally. "I have to face them." There was a long pause on her end. I could hear her breathing. "Okay," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm not going to try and stop you. I trust you. But you listen to me. You are a good man, Michael. You are talented. And you are kind. And you have built a wonderful life for yourself despite them. Do not let them make you forget that. Not for 1 second. And if you've decided it's time to act, then you act. See it through. I believe in you." Her words were like a shield. Her faith in me was the one thing they could never take away. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place that afternoon. A colleague at Greenfield, knowing I was from the area, forwarded me an email chain for my information. It was about a new city development proposal, a big one. A rival firm was bidding on it, and their primary contractor was listed. It was a name I recognized from the shell corporations Victor had set up. Keystone Logistical Solutions. And then I saw the connection. The rival firm's lead architect was an old crony of Victor's. If they won this bid using Victor's fraudulent company as a contractor, he stood to embezzle millions. It wasn't just about skimming off Anderson Construction anymore. He was expanding his operation. And my new sustainable housing project, the one that had won the award, it was a direct competitor for that same city development contract. Our firm was considered the front-runner. Suddenly, it all made sense. My success wasn't just an emotional trigger for his jealousy. It was a direct business threat. My innovative, transparent, and cost-effective designs could expose his bloated, fraudulent methods. His need to get me out of the picture, to discredit me with my own family, to keep me away from my father and grandfather, the two men who could stop him, wasn't just about hate. It was about survival. It was about money. A lot of money. That night, as I packed the gifts into my car, the dossier felt heavier than ever. My plan had been to give them a chance to lead with the heart. But now, knowing the depths of Victor's betrayal, I knew this was no longer a family squabble. This was a reckoning. I put on a crisp, dark sweater and a pair of jeans. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were clear. My hand was steady. I wasn't the lost little boy hoping for his dad's approval anymore. I was a man who had uncovered the truth, and I was going to use it. I drove through the familiar streets of my hometown. Christmas lights twinkled on every house, little beacons of warmth and family that felt a million miles away. When I pulled up across the street from my father's house, it was lit up like a Christmas tree, every window glowing. It looked perfect, but I knew better. I knew that behind that perfect facade, a rot was eating away at the foundations, and I was the only one with the tools to fix it, or tear it all down. For a full 5 minutes, I just sat there in the car, the engine off, the silence broken only by the sound of my own breathing. The house stood on a small hill, a large, handsome colonial that my father had been so proud of. It was supposed to be the symbol of his success, the fortress of our family. Tonight, it felt like a stage, and the play was about to reach its climax. I could see their silhouettes moving behind the curtains. A burst of laughter would occasionally drift across the manicured lawn. They were in their world, safe and warm, oblivious. They were living in a story where I was the villain, the ungrateful son, the family disappointment. A story carefully crafted by my uncle. They had no idea that I was about to flip the script, to reveal who the real villain was. My gaze fell to the passenger seat. The brightly wrapped gifts sat next to the stark, ominous dossier. Hope and destruction side by side. For a moment, A wave of exhaustion washed over me. What if I just drove away? What if I just left them to their lies, to their perfect, hollow Christmas? I could go to my mom's place. We could order Chinese food, watch an old movie, and pretend this other family didn't exist. I could leave the dossier with Marcus and let the lawyers handle it. I could wash my hands of the whole thing. It would be so easy. My mind flashed back to a Christmas maybe 10 years ago, before everything went wrong. We were all in that living room. My dad was trying to assemble a new bike for Emma, cursing at the instructions. Thomas and I were having a video game tournament, and my mom was bringing out cookies. My grandfather was telling one of his long, rambling stories about the early days of the company. It was simple. It was real. The memory felt like a ghost, a phantom limb I could still feel but could never touch again. Then another memory surfaced, a more recent one. My college graduation. My dad and Thomas had come, but they stood in the back, arms crossed, looking bored. Afterward, at the celebratory lunch, my dad had looked at my diploma and said, "Well, I hope you know what you're doing." There was no pride, no joy, just a grudging acceptance. I remembered the knot in my stomach, the feeling of trying to celebrate while a cold front was moving in from my own family's table. No, I couldn't drive away. Driving away would mean that the second memory would win. It would mean that Victor's version of the story would become the official history of the Anderson family. He would continue to bleed the company dry. My father would sink deeper into his bitterness, a puppet king in a crumbling castle. My brother would inherit a bankrupt legacy. And Emma, she would remain trapped in a web of lies, her potential stifled by the family's toxicity. And I would spend the rest of my life wondering what if. No, Marcus was wrong. This wasn't a bomb I could choose not to detonate. The bomb had been ticking for years. Victor had planted it. All I was doing was deciding where and when it would go off. I could let it explode in a courtroom months from now, destroying them from a distance, or I could face them tonight as a son and a brother and force them to look at the damage themselves. I thought about my grandfather, Howard, the man who had started Anderson Construction with nothing but a used truck and a set of tools. He'd built it on a foundation of integrity, a man whose handshake was his bond. His name was on that building. His legacy was being stolen and perverted with every fake invoice Victor signed. He deserved the truth. He deserved a chance to save his life's work. That was the thought that solidified my resolve. This wasn't just for me. It was for him. It was for the memory of the family we used to be. I took a deep, steadying breath. I made a conscious choice. I zipped the dossier back into my briefcase and pushed it into the back seat, out of sight. I was going to walk in there with nothing but the gifts and the truth on my face. I would give them one last, final chance to choose connection over corruption. I would lead with the heart. But I knew, with cold certainty, that the evidence was just a few feet away, ready to be deployed as my last resort. I grabbed the pie and the bag of gifts. The cold air hit my face as I stepped out of the car. Every Christmas light on the street seemed to be watching me. I walked up the stone path, the same path I had walked 1,000 times before. But this time, every step felt heavy, deliberate. This was the last time I would walk this path as the person they thought I was. I reached the heavy oak door. I could hear the music clearly now, some classic Bing Crosby Christmas song. I could smell the roast turkey and the pine from the wreath on the door. It all smelled like a home I no longer belonged to. I raised my hand, my knuckles hovering just inches from the wood. It was time. I rang the doorbell. The music from inside was cut off abruptly. The peephole went dark. A few seconds later, the heavy door swung inward, and there was my father. The moment he saw me, his face changed. Any flicker of holiday cheer vanished, replaced by a stony resentment that I knew all too well. His eyes flicked down to the pie in my hands, then to the gift bag, and then back to my face. His lips thinned into a hard line. "I thought I made myself clear on the phone," he said, his voice low. "Emma invited me," I said simply, holding his gaze. "She said you wanted to put things behind us." That's when he delivered the line. the line that would echo in my head for years. We don't want you here. Go ruin someone else's holiday. He started to close the door, but in that moment, as the gap narrowed, I saw it all. Thomas's smirk, Victor's look of smug satisfaction, my grandpa looking confused, and my sister Emma, her face etched with worry, looking towards the door. She was waiting for me. My heart didn't break. It hardened into a single, sharp point of purpose. Got it, I said, and I turned to leave. I had only taken 2 steps when another car screeched to a halt at the curb. The door flew open and my mother, Patricia, got out. She wasn't crying or yelling. Her face was calm, her eyes like steel. She had followed me. She knew. Michael, she said, her voice carrying across the lawn. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of solidarity. She walked straight up the path and didn't slow down as she reached the porch. My dad, surprised, tried to shut the door, but she pushed it open and walked right past him into the foyer. I was right behind her. What is the meaning of this, Patricia? My father sputtered, his face flushing with anger. That's my question for you, James, my mom said, her voice ringing through the suddenly silent house. You turn our son away on Christmas, after your daughter invited him? The music was off. Everyone was staring. The festive atmosphere had evaporated. And then the first crack in the facade appeared. Turned away, Emma rushed forward, her face pale with confusion. She looked from my mom to my dad, then to me. What are you talking about? I've been waiting for you, Mikey. Dad, what is she talking about? All eyes swiveled to my father. He looked trapped. He glanced helplessly at Victor, who immediately stepped in, placing a calming hand on my father's arm. Now, Patricia, don't come into this house and make a scene, Victor said in his smoothest, most reasonable tone. This is a family matter. It stopped being just a family matter a long time ago, Victor, I said, speaking for the first time since entering the house. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a knife. Thomas scoffed, stepping forward. Oh, here we go. Saint Michael is going to preach to us. He folded his arms, trying to look intimidating. I knew you shouldn't have come. You just had to make it all about you. Didn't you? No, Thomas, I said, looking him dead in the eye. Tonight is not about me. It's about this family. And it's about the truth. That's when my grandfather, Howard, who had been silent until now, spoke up. His eyes were fixed on the gift bag still in my hand. What's in the bag, son? He asked, his voice raspy. I walked over and gently pulled out the restored photo of him breaking ground on his first project. I handed it to him. He took it, his hands trembling slightly as he stared at the image of his younger self, full of hope and ambition. Then I handed the blueprints to Thomas and the model of the little blue house to my father. I could see the confusion and a flicker of old memories in my dad's eyes as he held the model. He ran a finger over the tiny porch swing. Victor saw he was losing control. This is ridiculous. He's trying to manipulate you all with cheap sentiment. He comes in here, uninvited, and tries to ruin our Christmas. Is that what you call it, Uncle Victor? I asked. Sentiment. I looked at him, and my gaze was cold. You're right. I did come here for a reason, and it wasn't just to bring gifts. This was it. The moment of decision. I think, I said, my voice ringing with clarity, that it's time everyone saw the truth about the family business. I turned, walked out the front door, and went to my car. The silence that followed was absolute. Every person in that room was frozen, watching me. I opened the backseat door and pulled out the briefcase. When I walked back in, the atmosphere had changed. The holiday cheer was gone, replaced by a thick, suffocating dread. I didn't say a word. I walked past my father, past Victor, and went straight to the patriarch. I placed the briefcase on the dining room table in front of my grandfather. You built this company on integrity, Grandpa, I said, my voice steady. You deserve to see what it's become. I opened the briefcase. I didn't pull out complicated spreadsheets. I pulled out one sheet of paper. It was a summary Marcus and I had prepared, a simple flowchart. On one side was Anderson Construction. On the other were 3 shell companies. Arrows showed money flowing from the family business into the empty shells. At the bottom of the shell companies was one name, listed as the sole proprietor. Victor Anderson. I laid it on the table. My grandfather stared at it. He didn't need to be an accountant to understand what he was seeing. He traced the lines with a shaking finger. Victor lunged forward. This is slander. Forged documents. He's a liar. James, you can't let him do this. Is it a lie, Uncle? I asked calmly. Then explain the invoices from Tri-State Aggregates. I have the incorporation papers right here. It's a P.O. box you opened in 1998. Or how about the consulting fees paid to Eastwood Holdings? Another one of your creations. I have the bank transfers. I laid the documents on the table one by one. Each one was another nail in his coffin. I placed the engraved fountain pen next to the papers. A gift, I said. I thought the engraving was appropriate. Victor's face went white when he read the words, due diligence. Thomas looked like he was going to be sick. He looked from the papers to his uncle, then to his father. He was a part of this. He had signed off on some of these payments. He was complicit. His wife, Sophia, who had been silent this whole time, looked at him with utter disgust and took a small step away from him, pulling their children closer. Her silent judgment was perhaps the most damning blow of all. James, my father, just stared at the model of the house in his hands, then at the evidence of his brother's betrayal. The foundation of his world was crumbling around him. The man he had trusted, the man who had shaped his worldview for 5 years, was a common thief. The room was silent, except for Victor's frantic, sputtering denials. But no one was listening to him anymore. They were all just staring at the truth, laid bare on the polished surface of the dining room table. The silence in the room stretched for what felt like an eternity. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, filled with the wreckage of 5 years of lies. The smell of roast turkey and pine needles suddenly seemed sickeningly sweet. The festive decorations looked like props from a badly written play. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear a family breaking. It was my grandfather who finally broke it. He looked up from the papers. His eyes, old and tired, were now crystal clear and hard as flint. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at my father. He looked straight at his other son, Victor. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. His voice was quiet, almost conversational, which made it all the more devastating. Victor, he said, get out of my house. Victor's face, which had been a mask of blustering rage, crumpled. Howard, you can't believe him. He's a boy. I'm your brother. We're family, I said. My grandfather repeated, his voice dropping even lower, becoming gravelly with controlled fury. Get out. There was no arguing with that tone. It was the voice that had built a company, the voice that had commanded loyalty for 50 years. Victor stood there for a moment, his face a mottled red, looking around for an ally. He found none. My father wouldn't meet his gaze. Thomas was staring at the floor, his face pale, looking like a man who had just watched his future burn down. Their wives were already ushering the grandchildren towards the back of the house, away from the toxicity. Defeated, Victor grabbed his coat and practically fled, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot, and with that, the king was dethroned. The puppet master had his strings cut. No one moved. No one spoke. The party was over. The perfect Christmas was a ruin. My mother came and stood beside me, placing a hand on my back. It was the only anchor I had in the swirling vortex of the room. I started to gather the documents from the table. My job was done. It was time for me to go. As I was sliding the papers back into my briefcase, a hand touched my arm. It was my Aunt Helen. Her face was streaked with tears, her makeup smudged. Michael, she whispered, her voice choked with shame. I'm so sorry. I knew. I didn't know about the money, but I knew what he was doing to you, to Patricia. I heard the things he said. And I did nothing. She looked down at her hands, twisting a napkin. He knew something about me from a long time ago, a mistake I made when I was young. It was nothing really, but he knew how to make it sound like everything. He held it over me. I was a coward. I am so sorry. I looked at her, this woman who had always given me a sad, sympathetic smile before turning her back. I didn't feel anger. I just felt a profound sadness for her. For the years she had lived in fear. I gave her a small nod. I couldn't find the words to comfort her, because the truth was, her silence had hurt. It had been one of the 1,000 tiny cuts that had almost bled me dry. I hope you can be free now, Aunt Helen, I said quietly. It was all I could offer. I zipped the briefcase shut and turned to leave. I had to get out of there. The air was too thick to breathe. As I reached the foyer, my father was standing there, blocking the door again. But this time, his posture was entirely different. His shoulders were slumped. He looked old, defeated. The model of the little blue house was still clutched in his hand. Michael, he started, his voice cracking. I didn't know. Didn't you? I asked, and the question hung in the air between us. It wasn't an accusation. It was a genuine question. Maybe he didn't know about the embezzlement. But the cruelty? The exclusion? The years of choosing his brother's poison over his own son's love? He had known about that. He had chosen that every single day. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. It was complicated, he stammered, looking for words that weren't there. He made it all sound so logical. Hate always sounds logical to the hateful, I replied, the words coming out colder than I intended. He tried again. I'm sorry. The two words I had longed to hear for 5 years. And now that they were here, they felt hollow, inadequate. They couldn't patch the hole he had blasted through our relationship. They felt like a tiny band-aid on a gaping wound. Not now, Dad, I said, my voice quiet but firm. I can't. Not now. I needed him to understand. An apology wasn't a magic eraser. It wasn't the end. It was maybe the very beginning of a long, painful road. But it was a road I wasn't ready to walk with him yet. I stepped around him and opened the door myself. The cold night air felt clean, fresh. I walked out, leaving the ruins of my family behind me in that warm, brightly lit house. My mom followed me. We didn't say anything. We just got into our separate cars. I didn't drive away aimlessly this time. I knew exactly where I was going. I was going home, to my own apartment, to my own life. I was free, and I had never felt so alone. The 6 months that followed were a quiet, strange, and transformative time. There was no single, dramatic moment of reconciliation. The explosion on Christmas Eve hadn't magically healed us. It had simply cleared the rubble, so we could see the cracked foundations underneath. Healing, I learned, is not a dramatic event. It's a slow, quiet construction project. It requires patience and a willingness to accept that some parts of the old structure can't be salvaged. The legal fallout from Victor's embezzlement was swift and brutal. With the evidence I provided, the district attorney launched a full investigation. Anderson Construction was placed under intense scrutiny. My grandfather, despite his age, stepped back in with a fire I hadn't seen in years. He worked with the lawyers transparently and honestly to clean up the mess. Victor faced multiple felony charges. His reign was definitively over. He took a plea deal that would keep him out of jail but stripped him of every asset he had stolen. He was financially and socially ruined. One of the first calls I received was from Thomas. I almost didn't answer. His voice on the other end was humbled, strained. He wasn't the smirking golden child anymore. He was a man trying to save his company, his inheritance, from sinking. The bravado was gone, replaced by a desperate exhaustion. Mike, he said, the old nickname sounding strange in his mouth. We're in trouble. The board is restructuring. We need to bid on new projects, clean ones, to show we're turning a corner. I saw your proposal for the waterfront sustainable housing project. It's brilliant. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. The very project that had marked me as a threat was now being seen as a lifeline. I need your help, he said, and I could hear the effort it cost him. Not as my brother, as a professional. I want to hire your firm as the lead architectural consultant for our next phase. We need you. I need you. We met a week later. It was all business. We sat in a sterile conference room, lawyers present. There was no talk of the past, no emotional rehashing. We talked about contracts, timelines, and materials. He was surprisingly competent when he wasn't posturing. He knew the construction side inside and out. But as the meeting ended, he asked me to stay behind. The lawyers filed out, leaving the two of us alone in the big, empty room. I was jealous of you, he said, not looking at me, just staring at the polished table. You had the guts to leave to do your own thing. I was too scared. I thought staying was the strong thing to do, but it just made me weak. I let him use my resentment of you. Every time Dad praised me and put you down, a part of me liked it, because it meant I was winning. I see now I wasn't winning anything. I was just helping a thief rob our family. He finally looked at me. I'm sorry. It was a start. It wasn't a hug and a reunion. It was a tense, awkward acknowledgement. But it was honest. And for the first time in years, I saw him not as my rival, but as a man trapped in a cage of his own making. Let's just focus on the work, Thomas, I said. It was the best I could offer. My father was a different story. He didn't call. Instead, about 2 months after that Christmas, a thick envelope arrived at my apartment. It was a handwritten letter. 10 pages, front and back, in his familiar, slightly cramped script. It wasn't an excuse. It was a confession. He wrote about his bitterness after the divorce, his fear of being alone, his insecurity about me choosing a different path. He wrote about how Victor had fed those fears, twisting his grief into a weapon to be used against me and my mother. He became the voice in my head, my dad wrote. And I let him, because it was easier than facing my own pain. Every time he told me you were disrespecting me, or that Patricia was turning you against me, a part of me knew it wasn't true, but another, weaker part wanted to believe it. Believing him meant I didn't have to believe I was a failure as a husband, or that I was driving my own son away. I failed you not just as a father, but as a man. I don't know if you can forgive me. I'm not sure I can forgive myself. I started talking to someone, a therapist. My first session was last Tuesday. I told him all about you. I'm trying to find my way back. I read the letter 3 times. I folded it carefully and put it in a drawer. I didn't know how to respond. The wounds were still too raw. But the letter was a seed of something that might one day grow into a new kind of relationship. The fact that he was seeking help, that he was admitting his own weakness, was a bigger step than I had ever thought him capable of. The brightest light in all of this was Emma. She had moved out of my father's house and into a small apartment near her campus. She had been accepted into a prestigious design school. She was free. We started having coffee every Sunday. She'd bring her sketches and I'd bring my red pen, and we'd talk for hours about form, function, and light. She was brilliant. Her mind was sharp, her ideas were fresh. For years, her talent had been suppressed by the oppressive atmosphere in that house. Now she was blossoming. You know, she told me one afternoon, a thoughtful look on her face as she stirred her latte. For years, I thought the problem was me. I thought I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't the kind of daughter Dad wanted. I tried so hard to be quiet, to not make waves. I saw how they treated you, and I was terrified it would happen to me, so I just disappeared. I let Victor help me with my phone because it was easier than arguing. I see now that he was just isolating me. She looked at me, her eyes full of a new, hard-won wisdom. You taught me that the problem isn't us. It was the house. The foundation was rotten. Thank you for tearing it down. In that moment, I realized I hadn't lost a family. I had just started to find the real one, the one that was built on truth and mutual respect, not on obligation and lies. It was smaller, quieter, and still under construction. But it was strong. And it was mine. It's been almost a year now since that Christmas. My life looks completely different. My relationship with my father and brother is still a work in progress. It's not easy. There are awkward phone calls and tentative lunches where we talk about everything except what we should be talking about. We talk about the weather, about sports, about a new project. The chasm between us is still there. The trust, like a shattered piece of glass, can be glued back together, but the cracks will always be there. Maybe in time they'll fade. Maybe they won't. I've learned to be okay with that. I've learned that reconciliation is not my responsibility. My responsibility is to my own peace. The collaboration between my firm and Anderson Construction is a success, professionally. We're building a new library, a beautiful space full of light and quiet corners. It's helping to rebuild their reputation. It's strange, working with my brother to create something new from the ashes of what our family used to be. But in a way, it makes sense. We are both builders, after all. He just works with steel and concrete, and I work with light and space. We are trying to build a bridge back to each other, one project at a time. Some days it feels possible. Other days the distance feels as vast as ever. But my real peace isn't found there. It's found here in my loft apartment. It's found on Sunday afternoons with Emma, watching her confidence grow as she sketches out her own bold designs. It's found in the easy, unconditional support of my mom, who never once said, "I told you so." And it's found tonight. I'm standing in my kitchen, pulling a pizza out of the oven. The smell of garlic and basil fills the air. Marcus is on the couch, arguing with my mom about the ending of some movie they just watched. They're both laughing. The sound is warm, genuine. It fills the space in a way that the forced laughter at my father's house never could. This is my family now. My found family. It's not bound by blood or obligation, but by choice and shared respect. It's a structure I designed myself, built on a foundation of honesty. For years, I thought my goal was to get back inside my father's house, to reclaim my seat at that dining room table. I was so focused on fixing the old structure that I didn't realize the best thing I could do was walk away and build my own. The journey wasn't about getting them to love me. It was about me learning to value myself enough to demand respect. It wasn't about forgiveness, not really. It was about boundaries. It was about understanding that you can love someone and still refuse to let their toxicity poison your life. Sometimes, the longest journey we take is the one that leads us back to ourselves. And sometimes, the only way to build a future is to have the courage to demolish the past. It's not perfect, but it's real. And for the first time in a very long time, I feel like I'm finally home. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between your peace and your family? Let me know. Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. It means a lot.